I'm celebrating the release of my latest DVD from ChessBase, The King's Gambit. There we are. Let me show you that. Hopefully you can see that. There we go. PowerPlay 27, The King's Gambit. Who's that ugly mug there? So on this, I present a repertoire for white playing the King's Gambit. And, well, it's been great fun. And I'm going to look at some of my favourite games with the King's Gambit. There are so many attractive ones to look at, but I've just picked out a few. And it's created a little series for you. Oh, don't forget, this is available as a DVD, but also a digital download, and available for PCs and Macs as well. And you can get it from chessbase.com and the online shop there. So here we go. This game is just great. Played by Boris Spassky with the white pieces, who, well, he loved playing the King's Gambit and won some great games with it. And he's playing Yasser Seirawan. Now, this is not in ancient times. This was, well, fairly ancient, 1985, and the Candidates Tournament. So, pretty incredible that we see a King's Gambit in a Candidates Tournament. Actually, Yasser writes about this game, and let me just put the F-pawn back. And he wrote about this game very entertainingly, actually. He said that he had a special variation in the Petrov prepared. He'd gone away from his usual Caro-Kann. But somehow Spassky had some kind of sixth sense at the board. And he could see him weighing up his second move. And almost like he was sort of juggling like this. Should I? Shouldn't I? And instead of knight f3, he played f4 with a King's Gambit. And of course, this rather threw Yasser, who certainly wasn't expecting this one at all. And he said that, well, he had, of course, something prepared, but he hit upon this variation, which he said he'd been analysing a little bit, I think some weeks before. So knight e7 is a little bit unusual, but actually not so bad. I mean, it's very well motivated. The knight wants to come out potentially to g6 to guard that f-pawn. And, well, we'll see why that's important, but basically it's about keeping the f-file closed. But also after d4, black hits out with d5. So, I mean, this is good classical chess. You counter white's centre by advancing your own centre pawn. Now, on the DVD, I actually recommend queen e2 here, which is a very interesting move. The idea is to try and hinder black's development. But Spassky played in more traditional way, knight c3, and it's also a good move. Seirawan exchanged pawns on e4 and then played knight g6. So we can see that black holds onto that pawn, and it means it's difficult for that bishop to enter the game. So actually, it's not just about holding onto that pawn. I mean, it's nice to keep your extra pawn, but it's about actually hampering the development of white's pieces and keeping that f-file closed, which is crucial. You know, the f7 pawn can be the weak spot in black's position. Now, Spassky had actually reached this before in a game from 1962, and he'd played bishop c4. Let's just have a very quick look at this, because this is quite important. I mean, bishop c4 looks like the most natural move, pointing at f7. But after bishop e7, well, if white just plays normally with castles, I should say that Spassky actually played h4 there with some chaos. But if white just makes a normal move, black's king is pretty safe now. And it's really hard to see how white generates play in this position. And black, sooner or later, is going to be able to strike out with, let's say, knight d7 and c5, or develop this bishop to f5 or g4. So if the natural move bishop c4 isn't any good, what did Spassky do? Well, he played h4 immediately. And this is very clever. Let's just see what happens if black blocks this h-pawn. You can see already that the game is kind of getting a bit wacky. But if we can push that knight out of the way, then obviously it goes backwards. That's good. And then we can take the pawn, and white's development is very clear. So what happens if black blocks this? Well, now let's go back to bishop c4. So black develops, and now knight fg5, attacking that pawn on f7. And already black is in massive trouble here. I mean, obviously, castles loses instantly to queen h5. I mean, it just shows you we're on the 10th move and black is getting checkmated. This can happen in the King's Gambit. But in any case, it's incredibly difficult for black to survive this position. You know, f7 is just fatally weak. So let's go back. So h4 has just been played by Spassky, and it's a dangerous move. Now, Sire thought that he could get out of his troubles by playing queen e7, pinning that knight on the e-file. Not so clear. Well, Spassky played a beautiful move that you do see sometimes now and again in the King's Gambit. Perhaps you'd like to have a think. And what would you play with white in this position? King f2 was the move. Beautiful. There you go. That's why we gave up the f-pawn to vacate the f2 square. King is actually pretty safe on f2. I mean, this diagonal is closed. But the point, of course, is that we're clearing the e-file. And if queen takes knight, then bishop b5 check, and rook e1 skewers the queen and king, or pins the queen to the king, and game over. So let's come back. After king f2, Sire in trouble. He realised it. He's got to get his king to safety, and it's not that simple. He's got to clear the queenside pieces or the kingside pieces, and suddenly, well, pretty quickly, a rook is going to come to the middle. So bishop g4. Reasonable. Pinning, and now h5. The h-pawn presses on, and you can see that that knight is in some trouble. It has to go forward, but that's not ideal. At first, Yasser thought that bishop takes pawn was actually playable, but after this, bishop c4 is a killer, threatening bishop takes f7 and knight g5 check, but also threatening bishop d5, attacking the queen, attacking on b7. And if queen e7, then just knight e5. Of course, if the knights are exchanged, the queen disappears. And otherwise, f7 is caving in. Another case of the weakness of the f7 square. So let's come back. h5 has just been played. Knight h4. And bishop takes pawn. So that bishop comes into the game, and white is developing rapidly. Queen takes knight, still problematic because of check. Whoops, I misfired because of a check. Knight c6, black hastens to develop, and you can actually take this knight here, but Spassky just continued with sound development, and actually, why not? It's very strong. So castle's queenside, getting the king out, but it's a case of out of the frying pan and into the soup, I'm afraid, because after this, the queenside pawns are shattered and black's king is terribly weak. Queen d3 is powerful. Well, it's no big surprise that black's king is in trouble when you see a move like this. So this is incredible. Black's king has no safety. So knight takes f3, pawn takes f3, bishop f5. There really is nothing better for black. Queen a6 check, king b8, and knight c5, threatening mate on b7. Bishop c8 is the only move that stops that, and queen takes c6. So let's do a material count. Well, white is a pawn up, but more than that, his pieces are superb. The rooks are connected. We're ready to move one into the middle. Black's rooks, of course, split. Black's development is terrible. Sire took a pawn. And now rook AE1 hits the queen. And there's no good move here. If queen takes knight, then bishop takes c7 is mate. And if queen d8, then rook e8 is going to win that queen. Let's go back. So after rook AE1, rook takes bishop, queen b5 check. Now, Spassky just repeated moves, and then he took the queen. Just show him who's boss, basically. So now it's rook and bishop against queen, but black's king is very poorly situated, of course, so it should be pretty simple, but Spassky's technique is great. So first of all, he got rid of one of those bishops. That's good news. And now rook d8. So you've got to be a little bit careful, but white gets out of that by playing queen b5 check. And then rook takes d8 check, bishop takes d8. So these simplifications, of course, are of great benefit to white, because now that queen can start looking for targets around the board. Queens are brilliant at identifying weaknesses when the board opens. So weak pawn, weak pawn, weak pawn. Those are the pieces that are unprotected. So that's where the queen is heading. And of course, the fact that black's king is exposed does not help black's cause. Queen a4 is a great move. Hitting the pawn. Now you might think this is simple, but technique, good technique is very important. If that pawn advances, there we go. We can see that queen just sliding across, a check, and then it wins the pawn on g7. So g5 from sire 1. Queen takes pawn. Now, if g4, again, we've got a deadly check from the queen. Queen a8 check, and it comes back. There you go. Check, and then takes the pawn on g4. That's how powerful that queen is. Just can cruise straight across the board. Rook f4 played. And now queen a6 check. King b8, queen d3. So there we go, that queen finds another target, that loose bishop and the loose h-pawn. It really is deadly. g4, but this is a forlorn hope. After king g3, sire 1 resigned. Great game from Spassky. Let's just see exactly what might happen. The rook can take the pawn check. The king comes up, and, well, I think you can see that very soon that pawn is going to roll home. What a superb game from Spassky, and this just shows the kind of romantic flair that he had in his play. And yeah, that star move of the game in this position, king f2. And after that, basically, I think we can say black is cooked there. Brilliant stuff. So there we go. If you're interested in the King's Gambit, do check out my new DVD or digital download from chessbase.com. You can buy it from the online shop there. Thanks for watching. More of these games coming soon.